Loss of life is one too many, and in the month of March, we've lost 7 Portlanders to violence, 6 of which to firearm, 1 to a stabbing. That's still substantially less than when we were this time last year, but it saddens me greatly, and I feel and wear the responsibility and the burden for each of those individuals, recognizing not only are their lives impacted, but so are impacted the community and the neighborhoods in which these acts of violence occur. It impacts our officers who are first responders, our detectives who do the investigations, our criminalists, the district attorney's office, other first responders, and the entire process. A report done in 2020 by California Partnerships identified a financial cost of almost $1.4 million for an average homicide in the city of Portland. Not only in the humanity, in the absolute sanctity of life, all the way to a time when we are struggling as a city with our fiscal accounting and how we can look for ways to be more responsible. One is a reduction in crime. If crime is expensive, and it's expensive in lives lost, it's expensive in fiscal requirements to produce and to review and do these investigations. I am saddened also at the, just announcement we made today about the youthfulness of some of these victims. A 17-year-old young man that we just mentioned released his information today. I have concerns going into break next week. I think we need to have an increased amount of heightened awareness, and I will be directing all of our resources in that regard to continue to have a heavy emphasis on outreach, community partnership, and enforcement. We know that the vast majority of these crimes, although there have only been a few arrests made, somebody knows something. That typically somebody has information, and we are asking, as we have done many times before, for that participation. And I recognize the trust involved in that, and I understand the challenge in the history of maybe people that are justice involved not feeling comfortable coming forward, not feeling comfortable participating in the process. I would encourage them that there are many ways to do that. If they don't want to reach out to us directly, there's always Crime Stoppers, there's Anonymous, they can reach out to the district attorney's office. We have our outreach workers, our program through both Ceasefire and Office of Violence Prevention. There are many, many ways for community to interact with us on these critical cases, but we need community support. We need community involvement. This is something that impacts all of us. As I said, it's unacceptable. This rate of violence that we're seeing this month is unique. I want to emphasize this is not something that we have seen consistently over the last several months, but I wanted to bring us together today and appeal to the community for their help to not only stop or prevent future violence, but to help in the participation of these cases so we can bring the families and investigators some conclusion.
Go ahead, Chief, can you again walk us through, of these incidences in March, how many of them have been solved?
I believe we've made 2 arrests out of the 7. So that's 5 that have not completed an arrest. Of course, there are ongoing investigations, and the arrests may be coming, but right now we've made 2 out of the 7.
And to add to that, again, 10 total, and there was 1 more from the prior to March homicide. So of the 10, 3 have been solved.
Do we know how many of these are targeted and how many of these are random?
Right now, we aren't seeing any type of pattern or connection with them. They all appear to be independent. The challenge with the crime of homicide in particular is it is oftentimes very personal, not seem obvious because it involves the individual and the loss of life. But what I mean by personal, it's usually very emotional. There are many factors that go into it. So I would not say that everything has a randomness to it, but there is not a connection with these. We're not seeing any one particular example. We're actively working all aspects of it. And of course, we do look for patterns or things that might be indicators of ways we can intersect. And that's where, Office of Violence Prevention, Ceasefire, these other programs can maybe step in. But right now, we're, really looking at each one as an independent investigation.
Chief, when you're looking at where to redirect this, like you said, there's no pattern between these, and they were in different areas of Portland. You had 3 in North Portland, 3 in Deep Southeast. What are you thinking about when directing resources, whether it's patrols with the 15 or particularly moving some patrols patrol officers to gather certain areas? What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that the first step in crime reduction is in crime prevention. So really in just that high visibility. And we do, unfortunately, see some parts of the city that are more greatly impacted. In this case, you're right about the dispersal, but certainly some areas in East Portland, Hazelwood, and some of those neighborhoods. And then working and really relying upon the data, maybe where we've seen an increase in number of activity around shootings, really letting the data drive that. So in one, it's just an appearance, just an increased amount of visibility and awareness community. And then two, looking at the data. It does not have to be enforcement oriented. There may be an enforcement component to it where you're going to continue to investigate these crimes as well as make arrests, whether they be on gun charges or other acts of violence. But I don't believe that to solve these or to prevent future violence that enforcement is required, but I do think presence is required. And, you know, as we've talked about before, you know, with the amount of staffing and the challenges we're facing to continue to meet the demands and the expectations of Portlanders, that will be a challenge, but I just want to reiterate that's a commitment of mine to try to figure out in the best of our ability over the course of the next several days to have that impact.
Just a quick follow-up. Like, you mentioned Hazelwood, and I know, like, last year in particular for the police bureau focus was 122nd and 148th Avenue. You were at a neighborhood association, so when you're thinking about focus with presence, are you looking at Hazelwood, Halihurst, Gilbert, Centennial?
Yeah, I definitely think those neighborhoods in and of themselves are certainly an awareness piece because we've seen such a degree of violence there, unfortunately. And yeah, I haven't forgotten that conversation and the passion expressed by the neighborhood associations and the community members of their desire to have a city and a community where people can thrive and live and work and play and feel safe.
Is there anything that you hope, like if we take one bit of information away from this press conference, that you hope makes it into every single one of our stories?
Yeah, it really is. This is really a community effort. This is a community loss, but it can also be a win in the sense that we can come together and work together to find a solution to these crimes that have been committed, and then continue to work towards promoting a safer Portland. As mentioned, we're down considerably from where we were last year. So there are many things happening. Our stolen vehicles are down. Our gun violence report in February was the lowest number of shootings since February of 2020. I mean, there are things happening, but I just felt a sense of responsibility today to come before Portlanders and really emphasize and recognize the tragedy and this loss of life, recognize our continued commitment to public safety for all, recognize that, again, many of our victims in this case are people of marginalized community, people of color, women, etc., that, these are the principles that we talk about and hold dearly in Portland. And it's not okay. It's not acceptable to just have these events be a news story. There's a piece of this that really involves all of us. It's a failure, I believe, by all of us, not just, this includes the police. This is a failure by all of us to not be able to provide that level of protection and certainty for every Portlander.
What steps is the department taking to ensure, like, spring break's coming up upon us for the people during spring break?
Right.
Is there any changes?
Yeah, well, other than just an increased heightened amount of awareness and, emphasis on trying to staff, as already mentioned, in some of the more higher activity levels, which once again is a data-driven approach. This isn't just a, randomness, but a data-driven approach. Last weekend, we did a large, outreach over St. Patrick's Day with our traffic unit and multiple traffic units to reduce traffic fatalities and traffic deaths. We know that there'll be a lot of people on the road next week, so we'll obviously be emphasizing, that as well. But really trying to marshal the resources of the Police Bureau. At the same time, recognizing that Police Bureau members are city employees. They take vacation. They have families. So as we circle back, not to, harp on it, but as we circle back to staffing challenges, this is all being made within the mindset of that and being fiscally responsible with our overtime. This is a great conversation to have ongoing with City Council because, as I said, the cost of crime does impact the city. It does impact the city budget. And if we can find ways to be more effective in reducing crime, I believe there's a fiscal savings for the city as well.
And there are still plans in place for, in the past, in the summer, usually presence has increased somewhat.
Right.
For the safety of the community. Is that
Yeah, yeah. To the best of our ability, we're putting the ask out now to see what we're going to be able to do, for next week and over the weekend. Given the level of violence we're seeing, I don't know what's going to be able to materialize at this point, but we are making the ask of our team to be mindful of that and to be looking at it.
A couple more questions, John.
Chief, we know this has been a bad month, but as you said, trends have been going in the right direction. Some of the community advocacy groups I've spoke with have, noticed the city budget problems in the city of Portland and are concerned that things might start going the opposite direction in terms of outreach for gun prevention efforts. Is that something you're concerned about as well as the city of Portland could be making cuts to the budget in the future?
Yes, I think that, and I certainly have a bias around public safety, but in the 18 months that I've been on the job, we have seen a significant return on investment from public safety, the police bureau and our community partners. Those numbers are, they're facts, they're actual, they're factual, they're accurate. They tell a story. And so there could be a sense of hey, we're going in the right direction, so, why don't we look at other things? One thing we have to remember is our past, and we don't want to repeat that. And even though we end 24 for a second consecutive year, 23 and 24, and double-digit decrease in shootings, we were still 98% higher than we were pre-pandemic. That's not acceptable to me. It's not acceptable to me to be 100% higher than where we were in 2019 and say, well, we've had good success, let's go on to the next priority project. And I understand that all these projects are important. They're all critical. We're talking about critical infrastructure for the city. But I believe that prioritization of public safety over the last year and a half has demonstrated a return on investment with tangible results. And I have great concern that cuts made will be a reduction in services, and it will potentially lead to more negative outcomes, and that there is risk in that. And I certainly feel responsible to make sure people are aware of that any reduction in funding is going to be a reduction in services. Could potentially lead to an increase in crime. And we need to recognize that. We need to be proud of the work we've done, stay committed to that. And there may come a period of time in the future where we can make those adjustments, but right now, the numbers, and unfortunately, the reason we're standing here today, I don't believe support that.
Chief, it's not lost on us that, homelessness is one of the biggest crises in our city, and in particular, that showed up in the homicide numbers last year, and this year, I believe from my reporting, at least 3 of the 10 victims had unstable housing or were homeless. I guess if you could talk about that challenge. I've heard from officers on the gun team and folks who work at NRT, sometimes the challenge of building a relationship with homeless community and also getting them to speak, especially with cases like this.
The similarities around managing violence in our houseless population and that in our gang affected is really remarkable. There are very strong similarities, and it really centers around trust. It really centers around relationship building, understanding of the system. And unfortunately, many folks that are the victims of violence, particularly homicide, are in our marginalized communities. And so the challenge we face with the houseless community is one based upon that historical role of law enforcement in that community and the difficulty, the enforcement. It's obviously a very transitory population. Some of that's self-induced because we move people, so they're not in the same place where we can go back and find them. There's a hesitancy to want to participate in the criminal justice process, grand jury, all of that, being able to make court. I mean, if you're already struggling just to survive on the street and we tell you have to be at a grand jury in 2 weeks, I mean, that's a big ask, it's a big lift. So, our NERT teams and working with our outreach workers and really trying to find a way to establish those relationships, because we know the violence in the houseless community is not restricted just to homicide. We know sexual assault, sex trafficking, many other serious robbery, serious crimes are happening, and inside those tents, behind those tarps, and sometimes in plain view. And we really need to make that a priority for us in terms of trying to make sure that we're reaching out, providing pathways. Once again, maybe it won't be the traditional pathway where they give a statement to a police officer, but we create a pathway for them to be able to tell their story and for us to be able to act on it.
But I do have one last question for you. The last year, year there has been a significant decrease in car thefts in Portland. What do you attribute that success to, and do you expect that trend to continue forward?
Yeah, I mean, that is a tip of the hat to Officer Terrett and our stolen vehicle operations effort. Several years ago, month of January, had 1,000 stolen cars. I think it was 2022 or 23. We get you the number. 2023, I think January 23, 1,000 stolen cars. January this year, 305, 306, rough numbers. Mike can get you them. The stolen vehicle operation mission is a huge success. We're proud of it. It's being copied around the nation. We have other states that are asking for it, and we intend to stay focused on that. We have some grant funding to support it, so we're not coming off of that at all, but it's a great indication of what we can do. We have proper funding, proper staffing, and an opportunity to address crime directly. And that's what happened with SVO. And we've been trying to replicate that a little bit with retail theft. That's why we had the successful announcement earlier this week on the big search warrant. We've been trying to do that around drugs and drug interdiction, around firearms, around human trafficking, other areas as well. We're going to be looking at trying to bring that specific SVO model and see if there's a through line to all of these things. Because we know we find guns on street racing missions and we find guns in stolen cars. You know, are we missing something there? But the stolen cars is a great example of when we are, provided the resources, the time, the money, and the people to address an issue. I'd love to do that around property crimes. I'd love to do that around burglaries, commercial and residential burglaries. We used to have a burglary unit. I'd love to do that around domestic violence. We used to have 9 officers doing domestic violence investigations. Today I have 1. You know, so those are things that as we continue to grow the organization, I think we can continue to invest in, and we will see the same return on that investment.
All right. Thanks, guys. I know you guys have a newscast, and he's got other commitments.
Thank you very much.
Really quick question. I know at the MAC, we talked about your side gig, and